This episode may contain language or discussions that may be offensive or triggering. Refer to the episode summary for details. So, welcome to She.Confidential. My name is Charlene Ketchum, and today I am chatting with Mr. Wayne Hood, an attorney who is the founder, CEO of Infinite Estate Planning. And thank you for being here with me today. Before we got started, we were just kind of talking about the challenges that we face a lot of times, particularly in the Black community, when it comes to talking about decisions around death. What happens when we die? I know that in my own family that I have family members who refuse to have the conversation because they think that it's bad luck. Even though we've had relatives that have passed away and we've had to do um, everybody pitch in or asking someone to cover those expenses. And that can be really hard, especially during a time of grief. And then there are a lot of other people who think, I don't have any money, I'm not wealthy, so I don't need to have that conversation, or I don't have kids. Um, why do I need to have that conversation? Or I plan to be cremated. I guess some people think cremation is free, so they think they don't need to have that conversation. So, as Wayne and I talk, what we hope to do is dispel some of those myths that estate planning is something that everyone needs to consider. We'll talk about some of those considerations. And what I do want to note is that this doesn't constitute legal advice. So you do need to make sure you talk to your own attorney. We'll be giving you some general considerations, some general food for thoughts, hopefully some things that will help you start conversations with your loved ones, hopefully some things you can think about for your own personal planning. But then definitely you'll want to find someone who can help you actually look at your unique situation and determine what's the appropriate plan of action for you. And we'll talk about that as well, like where you need to go to find those kind of professional resources. So that's kind of a layout of what we'll be talking about today. But Wayne, thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's a heavy subject, but it's one that we need to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a topic that most people try to run from or procrastinate with as much as possible. But nobody knows when their, for lack of better words, expiration date is. So um, it's just better to get things done now. At least have something down. At least even if you don't. I tell a lot of people this because, and we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but a lot of people don't want to pay the cost and they don't think it's necessary. They don't want to talk about just at the very minimum, just write down a list of everything that you have, sign it, have a couple other people sign it as witnesses. Just write it down and write who you wanted to go to, like at the bare minimum. Um, because there's a lot that happens to your family or with your family when you're not here that you can no longer help them, assist them, or guide them to what your desires and wishes were.
How do you initiate that conversation with people? I mean, do people in your family and your circle know that you do estate planning?
Yeah. So that's a thing. So I have a lot of family members that I've been wanting to just sit down with. I want to do like a big group, big like 10, 15 of us and just sit down and just go through. We don't actually have to sign anything or go through it. Like if we
Hmm.
could just sit down and have that conversation because one, I don't want to be the one that has to deal with the probate and stuff. But at the same time, it's just I know how important it is. And whether it's like I said, whether it's a will, whether it's a trust, whether it's just simply getting your power of attorneys done, like something has to be in place so that somebody else can help take care. So having the conversation is difficult. Um, and as we talked about before, like just there's so many superstitions and so many things that come up, especially in the Black community, where we don't want to talk about it. We want to believe that the family can handle it and take care of it when we're gone. But come on, even if you just watch movies, if you haven't experienced it yourself, we all know that there's going to be some bickering, there's some fighting. When there's money involved, blood doesn't matter.
Hmm.
That's green is green over everything. Um,
Even if there's not any money involved, I mean, we got people in the family that will items. I
yeah,
just, what's in the house, you
yeah.
know.
Grandma would have wanted me to have this. How you know? how do you how do you know? And that's why I'm saying just write something down. Just put it on paper, sign it. I don't know. Take a picture of it with the date next to you. Something so that if you do have to go to probate, the judge can try to imitate or mimic what you would have wanted. Um, you don't want to go to probate. You don't want somebody that you've never met, that's never met anybody in your family, that does this all day, every day. It's just standard for him or her. You don't want them making these decisions. Um, you don't want them appointing your personal representative because they might not. If you have a spouse, it might not. They might not give you a spouse, and you might not want your spouse to be your personal representative. Nobody knows your desires but you.
Let's start by defining some terms too, because I want to make sure we don't assume that everyone is familiar with the terminology. So, we've mentioned probate and trust and power of attorney. So, let's start by just doing some definitions.
So just quickly, probate. Probate is the thing that you want to avoid. That's what you want. That's what you need to know about. So probate is essentially when you die, when you pass away, and you have no. Even if you do have a will, you still go through probate. But it's a process where the court system will determine, what happens with your estate. Your estate is all your property, all your accounts, everything that you own, all your debts, all your assets. Um, and probate, like I said, is when the judge kind of going through those things, and they may name a personal representative. If they can't do that, then they're going to administer things as they see fit. So there's the intestacy, with the laws of intestacy, which is basically each state is a little bit different. Here in Maryland, I'm in the Maryland D.C. area, but here in Maryland, it's like the spouse gets the first 40,000, and then if there are kids, then the spouse splits the rest of the money, like 2/3 to 1/3 or something like that. Every state is a little different, but
Mhm.
once again, you're leaving a lot of things up to chance, and hoping things work out when a simple document could really alleviate all of those issues. So a will is a basic document which basically lists all of your assets, and who you want them to go to. Um, all you don't need it to be notarized. You don't necessarily need an attorney. It's probably best to make sure that it fits with the laws of your state. But it's just a document with your desires. You sign it. You have two witnesses sign it. Done. A trust, I always urge people to get a trust if they can afford it. It costs more upfront, but it can save you a lot more in the back end. You avoid probate completely. It's very unlikely that your creditors can touch anything in the trust, and you're able to kind of direct exactly how each dollar or each asset is allocated. If you have young children and you want them to spend their inheritance on college or a business, or you don't want them to get all of the money at the same time. Maybe you break it down, they get some at 20, some at 25, some at 30. You have control. Also, most likely, you're going to be getting a living trust. So you're going to get one that's revocable. It's also called a revocable trust. So you're able to change it and edit it and make amendments throughout your lifetime. You still are the main trustee. You'll name a successor trustee to follow behind you, but it's a necessary document. If you have anything to lose, you should have a trust. What other things do we cover? Power of attorney? Power of
Mhm.
attorneys. So we have the financial and healthcare power of attorneys. The financial may also be called the durable power of attorney. There's a couple of other kinds, but these are the two main ones that I deal with. In any case where you become incapacitated, or it's a lot more detailed, but usually as the doctors say that you don't have the capacity to make your own decisions, you're giving somebody that you trust financially, because the financial attorney, financial POA, and the healthcare POA do not have to be the same person. Um, so it's people that you trust financially to take care of your bills. If hypothetically it happens during tax time, like they can handle all of your financial needs, and also obviously the financial needs that you give them access to. They don't just have unlimited access to any and everything. And then also with the healthcare power of attorney, you want to have somebody there that He's going to understand medical terms, is going to be able to communicate with the doctors and really look out for your best interest, or at least what they believe would be your best interest. And in conjunction with that, you want to get a living will slash also called advanced healthcare directive, which is kind of like whether you want to be put on a ventilator, if you want any life-saving measures, all those type of things that, once again, nobody really knows but you.
Excellent overview.
Yeah, yeah.
I would not have been able to do that without referring to some notes. So you do this every day, so so very good. And for the purposes of our conversation,
Hmm.
we won't be talking as much about um, medical power of attorney and things like that because that can get really intricate, and that would be that could take the length of another conversation. So audience, that's not something that we'll go deep in for the purposes of our conversation. We're really going to focus more on those estate planning considerations related to what happens to your things, what happens to your stuff,
Hmm.
and when you are no longer here. So that will be the focus of our convo for today. And probate is the number one thing you want to remember. Probate, bad, 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 bad. Um, bad, bad, bad. And the other thing that I want to throw out there is also as we're giving you these different considerations, y'all, I want you to remember that this is all very state specific, and that's why I also gave the disclaimer that we're not giving you legal advice because in your state there could be any type of variations with this. So, really, this is going to help you. Listening to this conversation is going to help you know where to go to get that advice for your unique situation. And it's also going to give you that fundamental foundation so that you can have a conversation with somebody and you'll understand some of the things that they're telling you because you'll have like the foundation there. So, this will still prepare you to kind of assess your own situation, but just know that state laws vary, and so that's why you want to talk to your own professional about your particular situation. And the conversation here will focus on what happens to all your things when you're no longer here.
One more thing about probate. Oh, another
Hmm.
reason why it's bad.
Outside of this, bad.
But another reason why it's bad. It's like, okay, you have a loved one that just passed away, and now you have to deal with all of this paperwork, all of this. First of all, I even looked through the probate. When I looked through the probate paperwork, I'm like, who is supposed to understand this stuff? Who is supposed to know what to do without an attorney? It's wrapped up in so much legalese and so many legal terms that the average person just it's unnecessary. It's an unnecessary struggle, as it is with a lot of law. But you don't want to have to deal with grieving. It's a frustrating process. So once again, it's not something you want to think about, but something that you have to think about.
And there are some people I think of, so like most people who know me know that I'm a major Prince fan. Like I love Prince. I always will love Prince. He was like the best thing ever and ever will be. But Prince famously didn't make any decisions because he lived for the present. He didn't care. And so there are those people out there who are like, I'm dead. I let them do what they want to do. I don't care who makes the decisions. I don't care what happens.
That's so frustrating to me. And not only Prince. So Michael Jackson, he had a trust, but he didn't fund the trust. So there's a thing where like just like with your IRA, there's a lot or your Roth IRA. So many people are like, oh, I put my money in the Roth IRA. I'm going to
Mhm.
start making, but you have to allocate that money. You have to do something with it. So with like Michael Jackson, he did set up a trust, but he didn't fund the trust. He didn't put any of his assets into the actual trust name. So granted, at the end of the day, after lawsuits and court and stuff, his kids still were able to come out on the right end, but they
Mhm.
shouldn't have had to go through all of that. If he simply, it's Michael Jackson. He didn't have to do it. He could have had people do it for him, but he didn't. There's steps to this, and like you said, this is a springboard to educating yourself and to being aware of what things you need to do.
And I'm sure probate court isn't free. So I'm sure some of those assets are going to be eaten up as the courts figure out what to do with your stuff.
Yeah, there's fees, there's probate fees, and then there's attorney's fees. I can't speak for other states. In Maryland, I think the first 200,000, the attorney gets 9%, and then anything over that, I think they the attorney gets 3.5%. So, I mean, if you have a pretty sizable estate, that's a nice little chunk of money
Yeah.
coming out.
But you
That's
just
somebody
giving away.
giving
You're
away.
just giving it away.
And that's why I
And
don't understand why people don't care. It's like, okay, you're leaving behind people, right? There's people, your family, friends. Even if you're a loner, maybe you'll donate it to some, like, if you're alive for that long, you care about somebody or something. So why just say
yeah.
I don't care? It can go to anybody, or the state can have it. Why not? Even if you're donating 100% of it, then don't, like, send it somewhere. Be intentional with what you're doing.
So where do people start? And I think maybe one of the easiest ways to design this conversation is to kind of come up with generic examples of individuals and situations and have a checklist, like these are considerations this particular person might want to have. So if I'm a single person, I don't have any kids. I do
Mhm.
have parents, but I don't have any kids. I might have siblings. What do I need to do with estate planning? Because I don't have any kids that I need to leave anything to.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of money. I have a car, but my car is not paid off. My house isn't paid off. I got some money in the bank, but I'm not rich. So,
Mhm.
I got some jewelry. Am I doing
Yeah.
estate planning because of my jewelry? What does that person need to do? Where's the checklist
So,
with estate planning for
so,
that person?
so I will. I'll use myself as an example, because I am that single with no children. The first thing that you need to do is get life insurance. I think that even for just funeral costs, you don't want to burden anybody. And like you said earlier, getting cremated is not free. I want to be. The only way it's free is if nobody claims the body and the state does what they do with it, but nobody can claim the ashes. And I don't know if you really want to go that route. So I always say, life insurance. But at the same time, if you're single and you don't have, a substantial amount of assets, whether you leave it to your siblings or your parents, or just, why not? Like, okay, a lot of times I tell people, with life insurance, get the biggest amount you can get, that you can afford the premium payments, because that's what other communities have been doing for a long time. And it's, if somebody in the family passes away and you just randomly get $250,000,
Yeah.
that's life changing money. Um, so why not? If it's costing you 100, 200 a month and you can afford it, I'm not telling you to break the bank, or to go without to do it. But if you can afford it, you can leave somebody money. It's not just about taking care of yourself or taking care of the future. Like, this is how, and this is a whole nother segment. This is how you create generational wealth. This is how you build like, it's. I know our community is where, I think during COVID, I think of any race or culture, I think the Black community took advantage of COVID the most. It's like through social media, through just learning about stocks and assets. It's, to me, at least that's what my Instagram feed shows. It's been
Yeah.
beautiful. Um, it's been beautiful. So I don't want people, single people, whatever, anybody, to think that estate planning is only for the rich, only for the wealthy, only for yourself. It is really more for the people that you're leaving behind than anything else.
Yeah. So the life insurance is that first step, making sure they get that life insurance, and then just the will to kind of itemize their assets and where they'd like their assets to go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, once again, for a young single person, I mean, they're not going to have an intricate plan, until they start, unless they have a business or they own properties and yada yada. It's going to be a simple plan. Um,
So with bank accounts, and we learned this when my dad passed away, um, and I hadn't thought about this with my own bank accounts until this happened with Daddy. But making sure that you have someone listed on your bank accounts,
mhm.
because if it's only your name, you can't just go to the bank and say, "Okay, my dad just died."
Yeah,
I mean, we want the money that's in there. They won't give it to you. And so those are considerations. You need to look at all those accounts. If you have investment accounts and all of those, and list somebody that you want to have those funds at the time of death. Even with your vehicle, if you have a vehicle and all those things, you can. you can list somebody because we that wasn't something that we thought about.
Yeah.
And he had life insurance, but we didn't think about like, oh, bank accounts. And I never knew that was. I thought once you got a death certificate, you would be able to go and claim whatever was that person's, but that it doesn't work
Mm,
that way.
nope, they don't care. They don't care who you can be the twin, you can be the spouse, you can be. They don't care if your name's not on the account, you don't get any information. And um, I went through that a little bit with my mom when she passed last year. It was um, a lot of back and forth with a lot of people, a lot of companies just trying to get information.
Another thing I think that is helpful that I learned, and you sometimes you learn the hard way. These things I learned a lot about estate planning. I think I took one estate planning class in law school, but I didn't think that was going to be my focus area, so I didn't really pay much attention beyond like, okay, let me do this class.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot when my dad passed away, and just considerations of things that I needed to think about, because I knew I needed to have life insurance, but I didn't think I needed to do much beyond that, because I'm like, okay, whoever wants my stuff can just have my stuff, and everybody will be nice to each other. And, I didn't think it was really that big of a deal. But once you start making a list of what you have, even for single people without kids, you probably have more than what you think. And you probably do have preferences that you weren't aware of until you actually sit down and make that list. And the other important thing that making that list is important is nobody knows what you have and where it is. Most people don't know where all your bank accounts are.
Right.
Like with my daddy, we literally had to go through his mail
Yeah.
to figure those things out, because how often do you sit down and say, okay, where are all your bank accounts, where are you investing, where do you have all these different things? So without some sort of list, and people can't access your email, they can't find those things. So how do you advise people plan for those sort of
It,
things?
it's funny because I recently, well, not that recently, but I had a client that had a trust already done by another firm, and I was looking through her trust, and I was like, I have to incorporate this in what I do. So she had like 2 or 3 pages of all of her accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So she has all of her passwords stored somewhere, and on that piece of paper it had the password to access those passwords. And I thought about it. I was like, why don't I already do this? Because how else are people supposed to know? Like me personally, also, if I pass, I don't want my social media to still be active. I think it's creepy to me a little bit when I see it pop up, and I'm like, people you may know, like
Yeah.
this person is not even alive anymore. So,
Yeah.
um, but yes, having all of your bank accounts, you don't have to get. I know people are real nervous about giving people access, but you don't have to give anybody access while you're still here. It's just giving them access so they can delete accounts, they can enter accounts, they can make changes, they can have that access wherever you feel safe. Write it down. You have to tell more than one person because what happens if you two. And I know this is a little off topic, but that's what happens to a lot of couples. And I'm dealing with a couple of them now. It's just like a lot of them are like, I don't need to make a plan if my spouse makes a plan because whenever it happens to them. But what happens if you get in a car accident and both of you die at the same time?
That's a good
What
point.
happens then? Like people avoid this conversation as much as they possibly can. Even if I'm sitting there with your wife doing her estate plan right in front of you. You're in the kitchen with us. We're doing the estate plan, and then I ask her the next day, and I'm like, hey, I can give you a discount if you both do it at the same time. No, just no. Okay, okay. And I've had multiple couples say the same thing. It's weird to me, but yeah.
It's
It'd be
it's
nice if we could
so
plan how we go. It'd be nice if we could, I lay in my bed, old age, all my family around me. That would be beautiful. That's very unlikely.
And even if that's how you go, like again, the family rifts, like think people are not themselves when they're grieving. They're just not. And the way you think people may behave could be completely different. And the other thing is people don't know what you would have wanted. or people you may have said one thing to somebody and then you may have changed your mind, and so now they're going back and forth even on the subject of cremation. There was a debate about that with someone that we lost in the family not too long ago. Did this person really want to be cremated? Some people close to him said yes, and then some people said no, I don't think he would have wanted to be cremated. Whereas if you've got these things on paper, nobody can contest that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's another thing. It's not necessarily separate from the estate plan or the trust or will, but it's something that definitely needs to be included. Like, do you want to be cremated or a funeral? If you want a funeral, where do you want the funeral? Do you have a specific plot that you want to be in? Do you want to be like, you need to be very specific because you don't, not only do you not want them fighting, you don't want them having to make these decisions. You should want this to be as automated as possible so they can actually begin the grieving process, um, and not have this thing drag out month after month. And probate, at least in Maryland, takes a full 13 months before it closes, and that's if there's no hiccups. If there's no creditors, if there's no consent. I had a this is I had a guy call me a couple of weeks ago about trying to, I guess, contest a will that had one already been contested, but the he called him up. He said his name was Mac, the guy that passed away. His name was Mac. I thought that was funny because his cousin said that he was this big player and he had all these women. He was still married and had two sons, but he apparently had all these girlfriends as well. And the last girlfriend he had, a, a month before he passed away, it was one of these like automated wills that you can get from like LegalZoom where everything is filled out except for your name and your signature. So one of those were filled out and left everything to her, to the girlfriend.
She
And
was a clever girl.
she and it worked. So this one of the sons contested it almost immediately, and it dragged out. I looked through the case file, and it dragged out for a while, and eventually the judge awarded the girlfriend. He said the will was valid. And now the family's like, she's trying to sell part of the land. They own like 100 acres in North Carolina, and now they don't want to. It's a big thing. Um,
We might see a Lifetime movie about that.
yeah, it was funny. I looked up his record. I mean, he was an interesting guy. But yeah, it's just little things like that. Like you don't want things like that to happen. I don't know what his wishes or desires were. I highly doubt that he was of right mind if he even signed it at all. Um, but yeah, rest
So
in peace.
you bring up a good point, because I know a lot of people, and I tell people all the time. I'm not just saying this just because I'm an attorney, but I think that people. I'm a fan of the internet as a starting point.
Hmm.
But what are your thoughts on people going to websites like LegalZoom and saying, I can go and do my estate planning needs there? I mean, what do you think that people need to actually talk to an attorney?
Absolutely. LegalZoom, Rocket Lawyer, they do serve a purpose. I don't want to discredit them at all. My recommendation is for at least for estate planning to use them only in like you got brain surgery in 2 days and you can't get an attorney to get it done. Like that at that point you're in a rush and you need something on paper. To me, that's the only time that I would recommend um, either one of those services. They're very standard, they're very basic. They won't address your individual needs. It's really just boilerplate basic language to have something on paper. And that does serve a purpose. But if you have the time, if you have the money, just at the minimum have a consultation. At the minimum sit down, whether the attorney is free or not, whatever, whoever's in your area. If you want to call me, that's fine. I am only barred in Maryland and DC. Hopefully, California and New York soon.
Yes.
But I can give you some basic advice and try to connect with somebody in your state. So that's I always offer a free 15-20 minute consultation. So, but yeah, I don't advise it. Just sit down with somebody, talk through what you have, what the situation is, because LegalZoom doesn't do that.
And you made me think of something else too. Like sometimes, particularly for those who may have assets or for those who have sizable debts. There may be, those are special circumstances, or if you have a special needs child, and that'll take us to our next scenario. But, if you have these, or if you have a child with special needs, if you have special circumstances, financial ones, or just people that you care for, a child or a parent, those programs aren't necessarily going to know how to assess all of that, particularly tax considerations, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a huge, and that's what scared me from estate planning. Because anything that has to do a lot with numbers and tax things, I'm like, that's not for me, and I stay in my lane. That's all above me. And so you need a professional because they can help you determine, okay, we need to bring in somebody who has a tax background to help us with figure out like what's the best way for us to structure this trust that's going
Right.
to be in the best interest, keep the money as much of it as we can in the pockets of the people that you intend to have it.
Right.
And those programs aren't necessarily going to do that. And
Yeah.
so people need to be aware of that too. It's not just about um, the attorney's trying to get the money. It's about, there's a lot of assessments that have to go on there
Mhm.
that these online programs aren't necessarily going to be able to walk you through.
Yeah. And I don't know enough about them to know like how up to date they are. And but these type of laws change all the time, and you don't want to, even if it's only $300-400 that you might be spending with them. You don't want to waste that money and turn around when the time comes when you actually need to use it, and they're not applicable. They're not legal. They can't. They're invalid.
Mhm.
Um, so you just want to. It's better to be safe than sorry.
And so, what should be on the checklist? So we know everybody should have life insurance on their checklist, and everyone should have a will or a trust on their checklist, and everybody should be looking at some sort of document or a safe place for all their passwords and accounts and things. But what are some particular considerations for people who do have children? And I want to look at single parents and those who are coupled separately because those are kind of different situations. Is there anything extra that people with children need to think about when it comes to estate planning?
So you briefly mentioned children with special needs. So that is one thing. I recently had a conversation with my aunt-in-law. I don't know if that's what they call it, but she's my aunt, and she has a son that's autistic. And we were talking about she wanted to do a estate plan. She found out I was doing estate planning, and she wanted to leave. I think she has another daughter who is in college. Anyway, she wanted to leave things a certain way, and I was just like, so what happens with your son? Is can he live on his own? Can he get an apartment if you pay for the apartment ahead of time? Can like there's so many little things. It's you have to know only once again only you know, especially
Mm-hmm.
with a special needs child.
Yeah.
You are living with them. You are maybe taking care of them. You know what level of independence they have. You know what they need if they're able to work. If they're on, and then some things change up if they're on government assistance. You don't want to leave them too much money that might cut
Yeah.
off their government assistance. So there's a lot of things you have to know. Should the money that you leave them pay off the house that you have so that they can stay there in a familiar
Mm-hmm.
place where they're comfortable? Or can you pay for an apartment? Can they live on their own? Who's going to help take care of them? Who are they able to handle their own finances? Like there's so many little things, especially with special needs, but even with other children that don't have any special needs, same questions. To be honest, it's the
Mm-hmm.
same questions. Do
Yeah.
you trust them if they turn 18, do you trust them with a big lump sum of money? Only you know how to divide the money up. Do they need to get a annuity payment? Should it go straight to the school to pay for their school? A thing that people don't think about it enough because they just assume, like we were talking about earlier, they assume people, family are going to take care of it. Who's taking care of the kids? If you pass away
Yeah.
with who is taking even the pets? You can't just assume that somebody wants to take it, Rover or whoever your dog or cat. Like with your kids, who is going to take? You have to have that conversation because you don't just name your somebody and assume that they're okay with that. They don't. They might not. You got 3 kids. They might not want to take on. That's a
Yeah.
big
That
responsibility
is.
to take on. And then not only naming them guardian, but also if you have the funds to do so, leaving them a chunk of money so that they can use that for the kids and not just placing a burden on somebody, because kids can end up in foster care very quickly. Estate planning, to a certain extent, is preparing for the worst case scenario, just being ready. You don't, God willing, hopefully it doesn't happen, um, but you have to prepare for every type of scenario that could come in your particular situation. Because it could be, you could pass today, you could pass in 50 years. You might not never need the estate plan. It's really just being prepared. It's thinking ahead and not trying to get into the, well, I'll wait till I I, I get a house. I'll wait till I get married. Why? You can amend it when those things happen. Probably every 3 years, have it reviewed. You might not need to make any changes, but at least have it reviewed and updated. There may be a law change that affects you, and then anytime there's any major life event, whether you get married, you have a kid, you buy a house, you have a new property, any major life event, immediately get it added to your documents.
And so, do the same considerations apply? We a lot of the people in the She Confidential audience, they're 30 to 55. They may have kids, or they may be in that sandwich generation where they have the kids and they've got their parents. And so, estate planning, like, is there a place in there, like, if you're caring for an elderly loved one, can you address that in your estate planning as well?
You can. The thing about estate planning, and one of the reasons why I don't suggest Rocket Lawyer and LegalZoom, is also specific. I just recently, once again, had somebody reach out to me. Their mother is elderly. I don't remember the age, but I think it was in the 80s. And she's trying to get the will and stuff done for her mother because when the father passed away, apparently she ended up on the short end of the stick, and the other siblings, according to her, took advantage and got all the money and blah blah blah. So she's trying to get a jump start on getting the mother stuff done. And we had a whole conversation, and then she put her mother on the phone a couple days later, and her mother was not lucid. She just came back from the hospital. She didn't even know I was an attorney. She thought I was a doctor on the phone. She was just telling me about how much pain she was in, and I was just like, y'all should have got this done a while ago.
Yeah, because that's too late, right?
I don't know if it's just a bad day or if that's how they haven't called me back because they didn't want to. The price was a little more than what they wanted to spend, but um, yeah, it's just you have to sit down and have that conversation. Whether your parent is 50, 60, 70, 80, um, sit down and have that conversation.
Your example raises another important point that I want people to really catch on to, is particularly when it comes to individuals. I mean, we think it's just elderly people, but or older adults, but it's if you have someone who has any type of cognitive or mental, something that impacts their mental capacity, there is a point at which they may not be able to enter into any type of contracts or make these decisions, because it will be a question of do they have the mental capacity to do so. And
Right.
so that's why it's also really important to have these conversations early. You don't want to wait until this person is really ill, and now that other sibling can come and challenge and say, okay, well, yeah, she signed that will, but she doesn't know what day it is. She doesn't know who she is, and now they've got some grounds to contest it.
Yeah, I mean, mental capacity is a big thing. It's one of the things on the checklist is if the will or trust is valid. So I tell people, and you asked this question earlier, but like if you are trying to broach this subject, sometimes you have to, and this is goes with other things, not just estate planning, but sometimes you got to just like plant little seeds and just, hey, just even if you just want to ask them, hey, do you have a will? Do you have? And some people will kind of shun you away and be like, oh, you just after my money, but depending
Hmm.
on depending on the relationship, like you just you got to force the conversation.
Yeah.
um, you can let them know, like, I don't have to be involved. I don't have
Hmm.
to help you get the attorney. Don't even tell me what I'm getting, if I get anything. Like, take yourself out of it completely, but at the same time, try to make sure that they get it done.
So, do you have to disclose the terms of your will to anyone other than your attorney?
No. Even the witnesses, even the two individual, or depending on your state, the two or three individuals that you have witness, they don't have to know the contents. They all they need to know is that you know have the capacity, you understand what you're signing, and that they saw you sign it. That's it. Nobody besides you and the attorney will know. Um,
Yes.
if that's how you want it to be.
Yeah.
Um,
So if y'all are nervous about people, your kids fussing about who you're going to leave what to, they don't have to know.
yeah.
But of course, when it comes to decisions related to guardianship, who you want to raise your children or your fur babies, you need to be talking to those people. They need to know.
Right.
But no one has to know anything else.
Yeah, because um, at the end of the day, you won't be there. So if one kid is like, "Oh, you gave them 50,000 more than you gave me," you know what? Who they can't be mad at you. You won't
Yeah.
be there. So just do what you desire is what's important. Not you can take other people into consideration, but it really should come down to what you want and what you think is best. I mean, it's your stuff, it's your money, your assets, your house, whatever it is. That's another thing. Like even with cars and houses and stuff, you need to make a decision. Do you want to give somebody the property, or do you want it to be sold upon your death, and you distribute the money accordingly? Those are little things. If you don't think the family's gonna keep up with the payments, or the house is gonna go, you know, once again, it's very individualized, very specific. Only you know, not only but you know your family better than the attorney will, better than the judge will. Even with the trust, we talked about special needs trust or supplemental trust, but even like spendthrift trust or other type of trust where you say you have a son or a cousin or something who has a drug problem, you might not want to give them a big chunk of money
Yeah.
for their own benefit. You might want to break that down, or um, if you have somebody that you just know is not good with money or has a gambling problem, you can put that money in a separate trust. It may sound like babysitting, but maybe that's what they need. This is similar to like what happens with athletes. You grew up, you didn't have any money, and then all of a sudden you get your first check and it's $300,000. Guess where you're going? Straight to the dealer or straight
Yeah.
to the and blow it. So
Yeah.
um,
And honestly, you're probably babysitting them now anyway. So now somebody else can take over that role. And
you don't have to put that pressure on somebody you know. You can it's going to cost, but you can have a bank or some type of company. There's companies out here that do that specifically to be the trustee and to handle those affairs, so that you don't put that pressure on another family member, because that also is going to cause some strife somebody's telling when your brother is telling your sister, no, you can't have any money for
yeah,
that.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's because, I mean, you know what? This is when you really get into the nitty gritty of estate planning, it really, what I think is helpful about it, and also why people avoid it, is it forces you to really examine what's going on in your present. Because it's real, it can be real messy, and we just become used to the messiness and how messy some people are. But when you really have to look at, like, okay, what are these folks gonna do when I'm not here? That's when you really realize, oh my God, these folks are a mess.
Hmm.
And you can use that to be empowered by it. Not only can you use that to make sure your wishes are carried out when you're gone, but you can also start kind of trying to prepare people to be a little bit more independent
Yeah.
of you. So it really can be an empowering exercise, and it will give you some peace to know that it's done, that
Hmm.
is done as you would have wanted. And you can be reassured that nobody has to know how you've outlined everything. Only your attorney has to know. And because I know that actually worries a lot of parents. They don't want their kids to know, or they don't want other people in the family to know what they've got or what their plans are.
Yeah.
They ain't got to know your business. So, who do people go to for their estate planning needs?
It really should be a team between your accountant or your whoever your tax professional is, estate planning attorney, and if you have a financial advisor. Um, all three, because they're looking at it from different perspectives.
Yes.
Estate planning attorney and financial advisor aren't going to know the tax system as well versed as they may be. They're not going to know taxes as well a CPA. And the same on the other side. The financial advisor is probably going to know your stocks and those type of things a lot better. Um, and then the estate planning attorney understands the documents and the legal language. So if especially if you have substantial assets, you really have to try to get a team together. Just don't do it on your own. Like I said earlier, at the minimum, do a consultation, but just it's a lot that goes into it, and you don't want to make a misstep, um, and then end up regretting it at the end.
So if someone reaches out to an estate planning attorney and they do that consult, the attorney would be able to tell them, okay, you need to bring in a financial advisor or a CPA. So they'd be able, because a lot of people may be hearing this conversation and feeling like, I don't have a CPA. I probably need one. They're probably thinking, I don't have a financial advisor. I don't know all the consider. I don't know how to walk through all of this. So, two questions for you. What does the estate planning attorney need the person to bring to them for that consult?
So the very first consultation, bring yourself. We don't need documentation. We don't need. We just need you to tell us about yourself, um, a brief overview, of what you have. It doesn't have to be exact, but do you already have life insurance? Do you have a retirement plan? Do you have any stocks or bonds? Do you, like just the what kind of accounts do you have? Your property, do you own it? Do you have cars? What's in your name alone? Because that's what matters the most. What's in your name alone? Um, but I mean, it should really just be an open conversation of just explaining your situation. Um, then when we go beyond that, there's going to be I can't speak for every estate planning attorney, but there's going to be a very detailed questionnaire where you're going to pretty much everything you said in that first consultation, you're going to say again, but very detailed, specific items. And we talk about. I even have like a little checklist in there, like what are your real desires? What is most important to you in this process? Is it protecting your assets? Is it um, you know, making sure your kids are okay. Like, what is most important to you? Because once again, everybody is different. Um, but I also, any planning attorney, any financial advisor, any CPA, they're all going to have people in their network. So if you come to me and you don't have those things, and I think you need them, especially, I'm not gonna make something up. If I
Yeah.
don't know something, a tax law or something, I'm going to send you to somebody that I think can help you. I'm not going to struggle to figure it out or delay the process or charge you more for it. Like, I'm going to send you to somebody that can, and we'll work together. We'll be able to communicate and set up a plan that's, a custom fit for you.
Perfect. And you answered my second question in
Oh,
there
what's the question?
when you talked about the referrals to the other
Oh,
professionals.
yeah.
Yes. So
Uh,
that's perfect.
Actually, my
And so
own.
just, a quick checklist of two or three things that every person generally needs to have as part of their estate plan. And we've kind of been hitting on this over and over, the life insurance and the will. And
Mhm.
is there anything else that is an essential to most people's estate planning needs?
No, no, I think we've covered all of them. I really do think that before anything else, I think the healthcare and financial power of attorneys, I think those two are critical,
Yeah.
because incapacitation could happen anytime. You don't know. You might just wake up in a coma. Well, I guess you don't wake up if you're in a coma, but you know
Yeah.
what I mean. um, you don't know. So those are the first two things I think, and then once again, the living will, the advanced healthcare directive, and the HIPAA authorization. I don't think I said that earlier, but the HIPAA authorization is basically allowing somebody else to have full communication with the doctors and get all the information, all your healthcare records, et cetera, so they can help make that whatever healthcare decisions need to be made. So you go through those, and I have like a basic package for those, but those are like I call it the golden hour package, but it's like that's the most basic thing I offer. And then we go into a will or a trust. And depending on your situation, once you have that initial consult, maybe we won't know until after the questionnaire, but we'll know what is the best fit for you. And then obviously there's financial considerations in that. A will is at least half as cheap as a trust is,
Hmm.
but once again, the trust does a lot more for you and saves you more money in the back end. Um, and then outside of that, life insurance, retirement plan, make sure your beneficiaries are up to date. Life insurance and retirement plan, make sure they're up to date
Yeah.
because I have clients that disinherit people all the time. They just just disinheriting people all the time. I don't know if they just made them mad that week or what happens, but make sure those are updated. It shouldn't cost you anything. You should be able to call up whoever it is and just whatever the paperwork, fill it out, change it. Especially people who are this is their second, third marriage. Or they have stepkids, they have
Hmm.
ex-wives. Update your documents because there's a lot of times
Yeah.
that people get divorced and that ex-wife or ex-husband gets everything,
Yep.
and they are mortal enemies. They hate each other, and they would not want to see each other profit or benefit in any way, shape, or form. But here they are, $1 million, $500,000 richer because they got all this life insurance money. You have to be intentional, be aware. I know we like to run away from a lot of our problems. I know before we start talking, we talked about therapy a little bit. Estate planning is a little bit of therapy, like you said. It helps you. It makes you examine your family, makes you examine your situation.
Yes,
So
this
yeah,
will
that's
force you to.
a little.
And so the estate planning attorney, you can help with drafting those advanced directives and the HIPAA. You can do all of those
All
things.
of the above, yes. And anything I can't do, I know somebody that can.
And so highlight, this is a great time for you to highlight all of the services that you offer. Now, I know that you are licensed in Maryland and the DC area, and it will be
Yes,
in California, New York soon. Fingers crossed, we are claiming that.
yes.
Um, but what are all of the services that you offer, and are they virtual? Do people in those areas have to come into the office? Tell us a little bit about your practice.
So with COVID, things are things are a little different. So
Yeah.
I am at the mercy of the client. If they want to meet via Zoom, I'm willing to do that. If they want to meet at their home, um, I do that a lot as well. And obviously, I have an office in DC that if they want to meet, we can meet there. Actually, I've never met anybody at the office. People feel comfortable with me coming to their home, so
Yeah.
that's what we do. But yeah, so I offer everything that we talked about today: the wills, the trust, power of attorneys, all the estate planning needs. I I want to offer life insurance at some point, but not quite yet. For some reason, a lot of estate planners don't do that, so I got to figure out why. I do a little bit of everything. So even with um, LLC, starting your business and trademark and those type of things also need to be considered. The business succession
Hmm.
takes over your business. Is it just a little small personal business that just falls to the wayside, or do you have employees? Like, is somebody going to take over the business? Do they want to take over business? Don't just leave your business to your kid. Be intentional, have a purpose, know what you're doing. But yes, I am here for you can call me about anything legal, and like I said, I'm always willing to pass it on to somebody else that I know is competent in that area of law.
Okay, excellent. And your website and social media, where can people find you?
So all my social media handles. Well, my personal social media handle is A Wayne Hood. If you want to look at my business page, it's Infinite Planning at Infinite Planning. Website is infiniteestateplanning.com. Um, and I also have YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn that are not very active, but they will shortly. Now that I'm post bar and free again to do those things. So, um,
Excellent.
and then if you need to reach out to me, my cell number is 202-978-0505.
Thank you. And everyone, as always, all of Wayne's information will be in the description box on the podcast and the YouTube. So whether you're watching or listening, his info will be there. And it'll also be on the episode page on SheConfidential.com. So
Okay.
any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just get started. If this isn't enough information, call me. If that call isn't enough, Google. Google has a lot of information. Um, and then whoever your local. If you don't know a attorney personally, I know that the black community we don't have out of you know only 5%, I think, of lawyers are African American.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I'm a little spoiled being in the DMV area, and I kind of forget that the rest of the country
Yeah,
is not
we
as
the rest of us, we ain't like we're not like y'all.
I
It's
forget that. Yeah, I forget that it's not as diverse. So, um, but yeah, just reach
Mhm.
out to somebody. Hopefully, you get somebody good. Reach out to me, and I can point you in the right direction.
Thank you for choosing this area. We need more of us represented in it. Cultural competency is so important. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for expanding your horizons. We're gonna stay prayed up on California and New York. So
All
thank
right.
you for
Well,
agreeing to
thank
chat
you.
with me
Thank
today.
you.
And audience, thank y'all for listening, watching, and I've been chatting with Wayne Hood of Infinite Estate Planning. I'm Charlene Ketchum, She Confidential. Until next time.